Mr. President, distinguished members of the court, it's an honor for me to appear before you to present my country's views on a matter of a critical importance for the United Nations, all states, and in particular for the Palestinian people. Less than a year ago, the court held that Israel's policies and practices in the occupied Palestinian territory, including its settlement practice, its continuing occupation, and its annexation of parts of that territory are flagrant violations of international law that must be brought to an end as a matter of urgency. The court's ruling marked a clear path for Israel to follow in finally bringing itself into international legality. Sadly, but predictably, Israel chose to ignore the court's ruling, showing that it considered itself above the law. Israel's hideous conduct, which piles illegality upon illegality, is well documented. Its most ruthless application has been the siege conditions imposed over the Gaza Strip since October 2023. Israel's failure to ensure and facilitate unhindered humanitarian assistance to the population of Gaza would surely be seen as an integral part of this crime against humanity, if it were ever to come to pass. And of course, withholding such a humanitarian development assistance also plays a role in a larger Israeli undertaking, that is, to demolish the established right of the Palestinian people to self-determination by undermining their ability to survive and stand on their own. On or around April 15th of this year, the Palestinian death toll in the Gaza Strip reached a grim figure of 51,000, some 15,000 of them children. Over 116,000 people have been wounded. These figures increase every day, even during the short periods of so-called ceasefire. It's not difficult to understand why, as the Israeli military has removed all restraints on killing innocents. It has conducted over 40,000 airstrikes on the tiny strip. Terrifyingly, it employs artificial intelligence to determine who to kill and who to spare. Establishes kill zones where anyone crossing invisible boundaries, even women and children, is shot on sight. Bombards so-called safe zones, killing countless innocents, many while sheltering in flimsy tents. And denies requests by international organizations to import equipment required to clear the estimated thousands of unexploded Israeli ordnance scattered across the Gaza Strip, which have killed or maimed numerous innocent Palestinians. Adding to these catastrophic conditions has been the systematic destruction of hospitals, water infrastructure, agricultural land, bakeries, homes, and other vestiges of life throughout the territory, creating conditions of suffering, disease, and starvation. The request now before the court seeking to clarify the obligations of Israel to allow international organizations and states to provide humanitarian assistance and operate within the occupied Palestinian territory, including Gaza, must be seen in this context, as it explains why the request has such urgency and importance. Israel's hostility towards the UN is too lengthy to summarize here. Its attacks have been particularly aimed at UNRWA, which since 1949 has played an indispensable role in safeguarding the basic rights and living conditions of the Palestinian people who were displaced from their homeland, providing health care, education, food, and other assistance to some 5 million refugees. Israel's hostility against UNRWA began long before the current crisis. However, since October 2023, its attacks have intensified dramatically. Israeli forces have killed over 200 UNRWA employees, attacked and destroyed their premises, ransacked their warehouses, and denied entry to UNRWA relief supplies. Israeli police have stood by while UNRWA's premises in Jerusalem were attacked. Israel also ordered UNRWA to vacate its premises in occupied East Jerusalem and has passed laws prohibiting Israeli authorities from having any contact with UNRWA and preventing UNRWA from operating within Israeli territory, which it illegally claims includes occupied East Jerusalem. Turning to the court's jurisdiction, our views and the views of almost every other state participating in these proceedings are in agreement that, given the legal questions raised, the court has jurisdiction to issue the requested advisory opinion, and that there are no compelling reason for it not to do so. As an occupying power, Israel is bound by international humanitarian law, in particular the Hague Regulations of 1907 and the Fourth Geneva Convention. Under those norms, and at the bare minimum, Israel must guarantee the basic needs of the population in the occupied Palestinian territory at all times, including the provision of food, water, shelter, and medical supplies. It must allow medical personnel to carry out their duties and must not adopt measures amounting to collective punishment. But Israel's obligations do not end there. Pursuant to Article 59 of the Fourth Geneva Convention, if an occupying power is unwilling or unable to fulfill its duty to provide the whole or part of the population of the occupied territory with essential supplies and services, as obviously the case in Gaza, it has an absolute duty to facilitate such provision by international organizations or third states. These obligations are unconditional. As an occupying power, Israel's international human rights law obligations are also engaged. Under these obligations, Israel must respect, protect, and fulfill the fundamental human rights of the Palestinian people in the occupied Palestinian territory. These include their right to life, to the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health, to an adequate standard of living, to adequate food, clothing, housing, water, and education. The obstruction by Israel of efforts by international organizations, including the United Nations, or by third states to provide basic services and assistance to the Palestinian people under occupation in order for them to enjoy such protected human rights entails a clear violation of Israel's human rights obligations. As a UN member and as a party of the UN Convention on Privileges and Immunities, Israel has further obligations relevant to these advisory proceedings. Under Article 2, Subsection 2 and 2, Subsection 5 of the UN Charter, Israel must cooperate in good faith with the United Nations, giving it, quote, every assistance in any action taken in accordance with the Charter, end quote. Israel's obligation to provide every assistance in good faith to the United Nations encompasses the principal UN organs as well as other UN subsidiary organs, including UNRWA. As UNRWA's mandate is to provide humanitarian assistance to the Palestinian people, Israel duty-bound to give every assistance to UNRWA in good faith. I now turn to Israel's obligation to respect the Palestinian people's established right to self-determination. I use Cogan's norm, generating obligations erga omnes. If that obligation is to mean anything, it surely requires, at a minimum, that Israel allow the provision of humanitarian development assistance to the Palestinian people by those prepared to give it to to give it so as to strengthen their ability to achieve self-determination. Israel's refusal to comply with that imperative while perpetrating unspeakable violence on the Palestinian people can only confirm the war's fears about its intentions. In closing, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia wishes to emphasize that the Palestinian people's right to self-determination is at the core of the question before the court.